We have to move on to Dr. Eyolfson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Dr. Melanson, we share a common professional background. I'm a recovering emergency physician from Winnipeg. Practiced for 17 years there. Now, one of the things you said about what we have to be prepared for, and correct me if I misunderstand, you predicted that we would be seeing increased use of cannabis after legalization?
Thank you for the question, Dr. Eyolfson. My understanding from other jurisdictions is that by decriminalizing and legalizing cannabis, those districts have seen increased reported use of cannabis, whether that actually translates in actual usage. But I think the evidence would support that in districts that have done so have increased the reporting of the uses of cannabis.
Mm-hmm. All right. The reason I asked that is that we had some testimony from Washington and from Colorado that actually said the opposite. They said that there was a brief increase, but that was transient, and particularly around young people, that the use among young people several months afterwards plateaued back to pre-existing levels, which was very near the national average, and that one of our witnesses from Colorado suggested that it was that the latest numbers show that it had actually gone down about 12% among young people since legalization.
Mm. Well, that's interesting. In fact, that probably would give me pause to go back to my own references, which I'm afraid I don't have available. But perhaps I would defer your questions to the other members of the panel that have perhaps a bit more experience and may be able to reference their experience in other jurisdictions as well.
Yes, Mr. Kleiman, working in the American system, what are the statistics that you're familiar with, particularly with Colorado and Washington?
We need a number of clarifications here. I'm sorry. Both, excuse me, both Colorado and Washington had wide open cannabis sales under the medical guise before they formally legalized for non-medical use. And at the beginning of their legal full commercial availability, prices in the, quote, recreational stores were much higher than prices in the medical outlets. So the primary consumers in the early days of legalization, both in Washington and in Colorado, were out-of-staters and a few respectable people who didn't want to go to a physician and get a phony medical recommendation. The price decrease, which we've now seen, is not reflected in the data that's being quoted. On a national basis in the U.S., adult use, heavy use of cannabis has soared over the last 2 decades, so that we've now gone from about 1 million people who are heavy daily users to nearly 8 million people who are heavy daily users. But all of that increase has been among adults. The adolescent numbers have been absolutely flat. And what explains that stability in adolescent use is an interesting question. One hypothesis is that the decrease in tobacco use among adolescents, which is correlated with cannabis use, is pulling cannabis use down with it. But I think the answer both in Washington and Colorado is if you're looking for the impacts of legalization, it's way too soon to tell.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. Thank you. Now I'm, Mr. Kleiman, further to you. You had were concerned about the falling legal prices. You had suggested we have a high tax and increase the price of legal cannabis to discourage its use. Did I misunderstand you, or was that what you had said?
That's correct. A high tax to the equivalent in state monopoly retail. An alternative would be, as has been suggested by others, getting commercialization out entirely and allowing co-ops to do it, and then you could regulate those prices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these, again, I'm talking to Colorado, and just yesterday, one of our witnesses from Colorado and a witness from Washington agreed that their price has actually fallen well below the that of the black market. And in fact, what is happening too is that the share of the market, of the legal market versus the black market, is decreasing steadily. That the latest data they have, which is a little bit old, that in Colorado, the legal market is 70% of the market, and they're crunching some numbers now, but a witness yesterday suggested that it's likely close to 90% of the market now in Colorado is legal.
Yes, if you're thinking about the in-state market, I don't know the numbers from Colorado. We estimated about 2/3 was legal in Washington State, a growing share for the legal market, which you'd expect. As legal prices fall, the illicit market is going to disappear. It's simply not possible to produce illicitly at competitive prices with commercial illicit production.
So do you still So do you still think it is a better thing to tax it and keep the price high, or would we not be better at driving out the illegal market by keeping the price low?
I think you want the legal price to be somewhat below what the illegal price would have been. That should be adequate to get rid of the illegal market. The thing that hasn't been mentioned here is the necessity for enforcement. You essentially have what's now a tax evasion market. And if you have a high tax and don't enforce that, then you're going to have entrepreneurs come in and sell untaxed cannabis as they sell untaxed tobacco. If you're going to have rules, you need to enforce them. And that seems to me ought to be part of the planning for this policy. So yes, the prices should be lower than illicit prices, but not so low as to encourage heavy subsidy use.
Okay, thank you.
Time's up. Mr. Davies.
Thank you.